The night hung heavy over Windsor, endless and unnervingly still, wrapping the ancient castle in a silence that felt almost alive. The usual calm of royal order had dissolved into something deeper, something that even centuries of protocol couldn't disguise. Inside Catherine's private sitting room, the lamps burned low, their glow soft against the misted windows. The curtains were drawn halfway, barely shielding her from the damp fog that pressed like a living thing against the glass. On the table beside her, a forgotten cup of tea sat untouched, long gone cold. Time seemed to stretch and twist, the ticking of the clock growing louder, marking every passing second like an echo of dread. Somewhere in another wing of the palace, a child stirred, a small sound, but enough to make her heart clench. She drew a steadying breath, forcing composure she did not feel. She needed to be calm, for the children, for him, but calm was a luxury she could no longer summon. The whispers had begun days ago, quiet at first, then growing louder in the hallways once filled with polished formality. Courtiers spoke in muted voices, their eyes avoiding hers, their words carefully chosen. The Prince of Wales was unwell. Just 4 words, simple enough on their own, but carrying the crushing weight of a kingdom's fear. Catherine had seen it before anyone else, the exhaustion in William's eyes, the smiles that didn't quite reach, the heavy sighs he thought no one noticed. She'd seen him walk the palace gardens late into the night, alone, lost in thought, burdened by duty he never once complained about. And now, that same world he carried was demanding answers that the palace wasn't yet ready to give. Across the ocean in Montecito, Harry sat motionless before a glowing television screen. The room was cloaked in shadows, the only light coming from the flickering broadcast that played the same haunting headline over and over again. Buckingham Palace has confirmed that His Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales, is facing a serious health challenge. The sentence repeated so many times that it began to lose its shape, its meaning dissolving into an ache that filled the room. Harry leaned forward, elbows on his knees, eyes unfocused. He wanted to believe the media had exaggerated, that this was another storm spun by the press, but the silence from the palace told him all he needed to know. Meghan stood quietly by the doorway, watching him, her heart breaking at the sight of the man she loved struggling with ghosts of a family both distant and dear. "You should call," she said softly, her tone gentle but firm. Harry didn't look up. "He won't want to hear from me." "You don't know that," she whispered. "I do," he murmured, voice low. "I left when he needed me most. Every bridge I had, I burned." Meghan crossed the room and sat beside him, her hand resting lightly on his arm. "Then build a new one," she said simply. "Start with a call." Harry's gaze dropped to his phone. William's name glowed faintly on the screen. For a moment, he hovered there, thumb poised above the call button. Memories flooded in, 2 boys racing through palace corridors, sharing secret jokes, finishing each other's sentences. Those days felt both impossibly distant and painfully near. He pressed the button. The phone rang once, twice, again. Each tone stretched like an eternity. Finally, the line clicked. But it wasn't William's voice that answered. "Good evening, sir," said a familiar aide, his voice steady but soft. "The prince is resting." Harry froze. "Tell him I called," he managed to say. "Tell him I—" He stopped, the words caught in his throat. "Just tell him I called." "Of course, sir," came the quiet reply before the line went dead. Harry sat in silence, phone still in his hand. Meghan reached out, covering his fingers with hers. Neither spoke. Some moments are too fragile for words. Back in Windsor, the rain began to fall again, light and steady against the windows. Catherine moved silently through the darkened halls, her bare feet barely whispering against the floor. She paused at the children's rooms, George asleep with a book splayed across his chest, Charlotte curled beneath her blanket, clutching a worn rabbit, and Louis sprawled sideways, one sock missing, dreaming the peaceful dreams of innocence. She smiled faintly, brushing a strand of hair from Charlotte's forehead. They didn't know, not yet, and she wanted to keep it that way as long as possible. Down the corridor, William's study door stood slightly ajar. The scent of paper and ink lingered in the air. His desk was cluttered with notes, photographs, and unfinished speeches, each one a fragment of a world that never truly stopped moving. Catherine walked in, her fingertips grazing the edge of his papers as though the touch might somehow bring him back to her. A photograph caught her attention, William in uniform, standing proudly beside a rescue helicopter, wind in his hair, eyes bright with purpose. "You've always given everything," she whispered. "Please, just don't give too much." Her phone vibrated on the desk. A new message flashed across the screen, "Still stable. Under close observation." Relief and fear collided in her chest. She pressed the phone to her heart, eyes closed. Morning crept slowly over London, grey and gentle. The city woke to headlines that made the world stop for a moment. Prince William in recovery. Outside Buckingham Palace, people gathered early. The first bouquet appeared at dawn. By midday, the gates were buried beneath flowers, notes, and children's drawings. The air smelled of rain and roses. Even the crowd spoke in whispers, afraid to disturb the fragile peace that had settled over the palace. Inside Windsor, Catherine guided the children through their morning routines with quiet precision, her smile unwavering, her tone soft. "Papa's resting," she told them. "He's going to be fine." They believed her, because children always believe what they hope to believe. When they ran off to play, she allowed herself one deep breath before returning to William's study. She sat in his chair and opened his notebook. His handwriting, firm yet hurried, filled the pages with reminders and notes. On the final page, a single line stood alone: "Duty is heavy, but love makes it bearable." Catherine traced the words with her fingertip, tears rising unbidden. Then the phone rang again. An unfamiliar number appeared on the screen. Her breath caught. She answered. "Kate," came a voice she hadn't heard in too long. It was Harry. For a long moment, neither spoke. She could hear the faint hum of California in the background, a world so far from theirs, yet in that instant, they were connected by something timeless. "He'd be glad you called," she said softly. "I should have done it sooner," Harry replied, his voice breaking. "I'm coming home." Catherine closed her eyes, a tear slipping down her cheek. "He'll want to see you," she whispered. When the call ended, she sat for a long while, letting the silence settle around her. Outside, the rain had stopped. Sunlight broke through the clouds, glinting across the gardens William had tended that summer. The roses shimmered with droplets of light. In the distance, church bells began to ring, slow, gentle, full of promise. The world could wait. The crown could wait. For now, only one thing mattered: family, fragile and human, trying to find its way back to love. And for the first time in a long time, Catherine allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, healing had already begun.